The cell was cold, colder than anything she had ever known. The walls were made of metal, smooth and shining like ice. The air smelled of iron and something sharp, something that made her throat burn. She sat on the floor with her knees pulled close, her arms wrapped around them, shivering in the endless silence. She had lost count of the days, but in her heart she knew it had been a week. 7 long days since the aliens dragged her from her home. 7 nights of pain, fear, and torment. Her body was weak, her skin covered in bruises, yet her eyes still carried a fire that refused to die. Every few hours the door would slide open. With a hiss, the alien guards would step inside, tall and thin, with pale glowing eyes that never blinked. Their voices were low and harsh, like broken glass scraping against stone. They never spoke to her in words she understood, only in strange sounds that made her skin crawl. But she knew their intent. She could feel it in the way they looked at her, as if she was not human, not alive, only an experiment. They would take her to the chamber. There they tied her to a metal frame. The room was filled with strange machines, glowing with blue and red lights. Each machine made a different noise, a hum, a buzz, a sharp crackle of energy. She screamed every time they used them on her, but the aliens only watched with cold eyes. Recording her pain, her cries echoed against the walls, but no help ever came. The worst part was not the pain, it was the silence that followed, when they left her alone in the dark cell again. The silence pressed down heavier than chains. It felt like the whole universe had forgotten her. She whispered to herself sometimes, repeating her name so she would not lose it, so she would not become nothing in the dark. Her body trembled, but her spirit clung to one small hope. Humans were stubborn. Humans always found a way. Maybe someone would come. Maybe someone would notice she was missing. But with each hour that passed, that hope grew weaker, like a candle burning down to its last spark. That night, or maybe it was day, she could not tell anymore. She heard footsteps in the hall. The sound was heavy, not like the smooth steps of the aliens. It was slower, heavier, almost human. She pressed herself against the bars of her cell, straining to hear. Voices echoed. The aliens spoke in their harsh tongue. Then came a scream, not hers, but theirs. A loud crash shook the floor, followed by the smell of smoke and fire. Her heart pounded. Could it be real, or was her mind breaking? After so much pain, she crawled closer to the door. The silence was gone now, replaced by chaos. The sound of metal being torn apart, the thunder of explosions. Her breath came fast, her eyes wide with fear and desperate hope. But then, nothing. The hallway fell silent once again. Her chest ached with disappointment. Maybe it had only been a dream, a cruel trick of her mind. She sank back against the wall, tears burning in her eyes. Still, she whispered to herself, "Hold on, just hold on." Minutes passed like hours, and then the door to her cell clicked. The lock hissed. The light above the door flickered red. Her breath caught in her throat. The door slid open slowly, shadows stretching across the floor. Her heart told her to stay quiet, but her soul screamed at her to rise. A figure stood there, tall and rough, his face hidden by the smoke drifting in from the hall. He was not thin like the aliens. His shoulders were broad, his stance firm. In his hands he held something heavy, a weapon that glowed faintly at its edges. His voice broke the silence, deep and steady. "Are you still alive?" he asked, her lips parted. But no sound came, only a trembling nod. The figure stepped closer, the light finally touching his face. It was not alien. It was human, scarred and wild, but human. Her tears spilled freely, hope flooding her broken heart. For the first time in a week, she felt the fire inside her blaze again. The cold darkness was no longer endless. Something had changed. Something reckless had come, and the aliens who thought they owned her fate were about to learn that humans did not break so easily. The cell was not the same anymore. The air felt different after he appeared. After the stranger stood in the doorway with fire in his eyes, the girl's heart raced. She could not believe it. A human, Here, on the alien ship. For a moment she thought it must be another cruel trick, but his voice, his face, his reckless energy told her it was real. He knelt down, his rough hand brushing over the broken chain still hanging from her wrists. "You're alive, that's all that matters," he whispered, his voice low and quick. Her throat was dry, her words shaky. "Who are you?" The man gave a sharp grin, though his eyes were cold with rage. "Someone who doesn't like seeing humans treated like animals." But before she could say more, the sound of metal boots echoed down the corridor. The alien guards were coming, their voices sharp and cruel. The human looked at her, his expression wild but determined. "Stay silent, stay hidden," he said, then stepped back into the shadows near the door. The girl pressed herself into the corner, her heart beating like a drum. The aliens entered, tall and twisted, carrying rods that glowed with electric fire. They spoke in their strange language, clicking and hissing. She did not understand their words, but their tone was cruel, mocking. One leaned close to her, whispering something in that broken tongue, and she shivered. Her eyes darted to the dark corner where the human waited, unseen. Then it happened, quick as lightning. The human leapt from the shadows, his weapon glowing bright as it tore through the alien's chest. The second guard screamed, raising his rod, but the human's strike was faster. In seconds the corridor was silent again, the bodies falling to the ground with heavy thuds. The girl stared in shock, not at the death, but at the madness in his eyes. The madness of someone who did not care about the odds. He turned back to her, his breathing heavy. "They won't stop, more will come," he said. She wanted to ask why he was here, how he had found her, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she whispered the only thing that mattered. "Please, don't leave me." The human nodded once, fierce and sure. "Not until you're free." The hours that followed blurred together. The girl was too weak to run, too broken to fight. So he carried her through the halls of the alien ship. Every corridor echoed with danger, the sound of alarms beginning to rise in the distance. The lights flashed red, shadows stretching across the walls like claws reaching for them. She clung to his shoulder, whispering questions through trembling lips. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Because someone had to be," he replied without hesitation. She stared at him, wondering if he was mad or simply fearless. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw something deeper, a fury that burned against the universe itself. They stopped for breath in a narrow storage chamber. It was dark, the hum of alien machines filling the air. The girl leaned against the wall, her strength almost gone. The human crouched beside her, checking his weapon, his face sharp with thought. In the silence she whispered again, "I heard them speaking. They said they want to break us, to use us." The man's jaw tightened. "They've been trying to break humans for years, but they don't understand us. Pain doesn't make us weak, it makes us dangerous." His voice was low, but it echoed in her chest, stirring something deep inside. For the first time in days, she felt more than fear. She felt the spark of defiance. Then came another sound, soft, almost too soft to hear. It was not from him, and not from the aliens. It came from the shadows of the chamber, a whisper, low and broken. "Is someone there?" The girl froze, her eyes wide. The human raised his weapon. Stepping forward carefully, from behind a stack of alien crates, another figure crawled out. It was not an alien. It was human, battered and thin. With eyes full of fear, the girl gasped. Realizing she was not the only prisoner, the stranger's voice shook. They took all of us. They're still alive, but not for long." Her chest tightened with dread. There were more humans hidden somewhere in this nightmare ship. The reckless man's face hardened. "How many?" he asked, his voice sharp. The stranger coughed, his body trembling. "At least a dozen, maybe more." Deeper in the chambers, the silence that followed was heavy. The girl felt the weight of it pressing down on her chest. The human turned to her, his expression fierce. "I came here for you, but I won't leave them," he said. She trembled. her heart torn between fear and hope. The aliens had already broken her once, and now she was caught in the storm of a man who refused to stop. For the first time, she wondered if survival was even possible, or if this reckless human was dragging them all into the fire. But one truth echoed louder than all the fear. In the dark halls of the alien ship, whispers had begun to spread. Humans were not silent. Humans were not broken. And somewhere deep in the endless corridors, the rest of the prisoners were waiting for someone reckless enough to fight for them. The cell was not the same anymore. The air felt different after he appeared. After the stranger stood in the doorway with fire in his eyes, the girl's heart raced. She could not believe it. A human, here, on the alien ship. For a moment she thought it must be another cruel trick, but his voice, his face, his reckless energy told her it was real. He knelt down, his rough hand brushing over the broken chain still hanging from her wrists. "You're alive, that's all that matters," he whispered, his voice low and quick. Her throat was dry, her words shaky. "Who are you?" The man gave a sharp grin, though his eyes were cold with rage. "Someone who doesn't like seeing humans treated like animals." But before she could say more, the sound of metal boots echoed down the corridor. The alien guards were coming, their voices sharp and cruel. The human looked at her, his expression wild but determined. "Stay silent, stay hidden," he said, then stepped back into the shadows near the door. The girl pressed herself into the corner, her heart beating like a drum. The aliens entered, tall and twisted, carrying rods that glowed with electric fire. They spoke in their strange language, clicking and hissing. She did not understand their words, but their tone was cruel, mocking. One leaned close to her, whispering something in that broken tongue, and she shivered. Her eyes darted to the dark corner where the human waited, unseen. Then it happened, quick as lightning. The human leapt from the shadows, his weapon glowing bright as it tore through the alien's chest. The second guard screamed, raising his rod, but the human's strike was faster. In seconds the corridor was silent again, the bodies falling to the ground with heavy thuds. The girl stared in shock, not at the death, but at the madness in his eyes. The madness of someone who did not care about the odds. He turned back to her, his breathing heavy. "They won't stop. More will come," he said. She wanted to ask why he was here, how he had found her, but the words caught in her throat. Instead, she whispered the only thing that mattered. "Please, don't leave me." The human nodded once, fierce and sure. "Not until you're free." The hours that followed blurred together. The girl was too weak to run, too broken to fight. So he carried her through the halls of the alien ship. Every corridor echoed with danger, the sound of alarms beginning to rise in the distance. The lights flashed red, shadows stretching across the walls like claws reaching for them. She clung to his shoulder, whispering questions through trembling lips. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "Because someone had to be," he replied without hesitation. She stared at him, wondering if he was mad or simply fearless. But when she looked into his eyes, she saw something deeper, a fury that burned against the universe itself. They stopped for breath in a narrow storage chamber. It was dark, the hum of alien machines filling the air. The girl leaned against the wall, her strength almost gone. The human crouched beside her, checking his weapon, his face sharp with thought. In the silence she whispered again, "I heard them speaking. They said they want to break us, to use us." The man's jaw tightened. "They've been trying to break humans for years, but they don't understand us. Pain doesn't make us weak, it makes us dangerous." His voice was low, but it echoed in her chest, stirring something deep inside. For the first time in days, she felt more than fear. She felt the spark of defiance. Then came another sound, soft, almost too soft to hear. It was not from him, and not from the aliens. It came from the shadows of the chamber, a whisper, low and broken. "Is someone there?" The girl froze, her eyes wide. The human raised his weapon. Stepping forward carefully, from behind a stack of alien crates, another figure crawled out. It was not an alien. It was human, battered and thin. With eyes full of fear, the girl gasped. Realizing she was not the only prisoner, the stranger's voice shook. They took all of us. They're still alive, but not for long. Her chest tightened with dread. There were more. More humans hidden somewhere in this nightmare. Ship, the reckless man's face hardened. How many? He asked. His voice sharp. The stranger coughed, his body trembling. At least a dozen, maybe more. Deeper in the chambers. The silence that followed was heavy. The girl felt the weight of it pressing down on her chest. The human turned to her, his expression fierce. I came here for you, but I won't leave them, he said. She trembled. Her heart torn between fear and hope. The aliens had already broken her once, and now she was caught in the storm of a man who refused to stop. For the first time, she wondered if survival was even possible, or if this reckless human was dragging them all into the fire. But one truth echoed louder than all the fear. In the dark halls of the alien ship, whispers had begun to spread. Humans were not silent. Humans were not broken. And somewhere deep in the endless corridors, the rest of the prisoners were waiting for someone reckless enough to fight for them. The chamber erupted into chaos. Dozens of alien soldiers poured through the doorway, their armor gleaming under the red lights, their eyes glowing with pale fire. The sound of their weapons filled the air, a hiss of crackling energy that made the walls vibrate. The prisoners froze in terror, their weak bodies pressing against the bars of their cages. The reckless human did not flinch. He stood tall in front of the girl, weapon in hand, his face lit by the glow of burning steel. His grin was sharp, almost mad, a grin that belonged to someone who had nothing left to lose. Stay behind me, he growled, his voice hard as iron. The first wave of aliens charged, their rods crackling. With deadly sparks, the human moved like a storm, his weapon slicing through the air with savage force. Every strike exploded with light and sound, the smell of burning flesh filling the chamber. The aliens shrieked, their voices sharp and inhuman, but still they pressed forward. The girl could only watch, her heart hammering in her chest. He fought like fire itself, reckless and unyielding, each blow stronger than the last. The aliens outnumbered him, 10 to 1, maybe more, yet he did not falter. His body moved with fury, his weapon an extension of his rage. One alien managed to strike him across the arm, sparks flying as the rod burned into his skin. He roared in pain but did not stop. Instead he twisted, driving his blade into the alien's chest. The force of it sent blood spraying across the floor, the glow of the alien's eyes fading into darkness. The girl cried out, fear and awe mixing inside her. The prisoners stirred, hope igniting in their broken hearts. They gripped the bars, shouting weakly, their voices rising above the screams of the battle. They had been silent for too long, but now the sight of one human fighting alone against the impossible gave them strength. The chamber shook with the sound of their cries. Fight, fight, fight. The reckless man bared his teeth, his breath coming heavy. Steel met fire as he tore through another wave, blood dripping down his arm, his body scarred but unbroken. Every movement was raw, desperate, and alive. The girl felt herself trembling, but not with fear anymore, with something new. Something dangerous hope. Suddenly, the floor vibrated. Heavy footsteps echoed from behind the alien ranks. A towering figure emerged, larger than the rest, clad in dark armor that shimmered with strange symbols. Its weapon was no simple rod, but a massive blade of energy that hummed with deadly power. The soldiers parted as it stepped forward, its gaze locked on the human. The girl's breath caught in her throat. This was no ordinary guard. It was a commander, a monster bred for war. The reckless man tightened his grip on his weapon, blood dripping from his fingers. Instead of fear, he laughed, low and sharp. Finally, someone worth killing. The commander lunged, its blade slicing through the air. The human dodged, sparks flying as the weapon grazed the wall, leaving molten scars in the metal. Their clash shook the chamber. the sound of steel against energy ringing like thunder. The girl pressed against the bars, her eyes wide as the two forces collided again and again. Each strike sent shockwaves through the floor. The human moved with reckless fury, but the commander's strength was monstrous. The girl could see his body slowing, every wound dragging him closer to collapse, yet still he fought. His laughter echoing through the chamber like defiance carved into stone. Then, with a roar, he drove his weapon upward, sparks exploding as it met the alien's chest. The commander staggered, its glowing eyes flickering in disbelief, but before it could fall, the human was struck across the back by another soldier. He stumbled forward, blood pouring from his wound, his knees almost buckling. The girl screamed, "No." Her voice cut through the noise, sharp and desperate. The human raised his head, his eyes burning even through the haze of pain. He forced himself back up, swinging his weapon with a fury that defied reason. Steel and fire clashed one final time. With a reckless cry, he drove his blade through the commander's chest. The alien roared, its voice shaking the walls, then fell to the ground with a crash that silenced the room. The remaining soldiers froze, their courage shattered at the sight of their leader's death. The human staggered, blood running down his arm and back. He turned toward the girl, his grin wild. "Told you they can bleed." The soldiers hesitated, fear flickering in their glowing eyes. The prisoners roared louder, their voices filling the chamber. "Fight, fight, fight." The aliens broke, retreating into the shadows, their courage lost. The girl rushed forward, catching the human as he fell to one knee. His breath was ragged, his body trembling, but his spirit was unbroken. "You're mad," she whispered, tears burning her eyes. "Mad enough to win." He rasped, his grin never fading. The chamber fell silent, filled only with the sound of prisoners breathing. The girl looked at the broken cages, at the humans still trapped, their eyes glowing with fragile hope. The battle was not over, the war was not over, but fire and steel had changed everything. One reckless human had stood against the storm and proved that humanity was not broken, not yet. The chamber stank of blood and smoke. The alien commander lay lifeless, its massive body sprawled across the floor, its armor cracked and glowing faintly as it cooled. Around it, broken weapons and sparks scattered like dying stars. The prisoners whispered in awe, staring at the human who had brought down a monster with nothing but rage and will. But the moment of silence did not last. A shrill alarm tore through the ship, echoing from every wall. Red lights flared brighter, the floor trembling as heavy machinery powered up. The girl clutched the reckless man's arm, her voice sharp with fear. "They know, they're coming." The human wiped blood from his face, his grin faint but unshaken. "Good, let them come. The more they send, the weaker they'll get." His words were wild, reckless, but she could hear the exhaustion in his breath. He was bleeding badly, his body trembling, yet his eyes burned as bright as fire. The prisoners cried out, their chains rattling, "Help us, free us, don't leave us." The girl's heart twisted. She wanted to help them all, but the alarms screamed louder, and the sound of marching echoed closer. The human kicked the control panel of one cage, sparks flying as the lock shattered. "Get up. Move if you can. Crawl if you must, but we don't have time," he barked. One by one, prisoners staggered free, their bodies weak but their spirits shaking awake. The girl stumbled beside them, guiding those who could not walk, whispering, "Stay together, stay quiet." The reckless man led the way, weapon raised, every step leaving a trail of blood. Behind him, they moved into the narrow corridors, shadows stretching long across the walls as the alarms flashed red. The ship was alive with movement now. The hum of engines roared under their feet, doors hissed open and shut. The sound of alien boots pounding in every direction. The girl's body trembled, but she forced her legs to move, her heart beating like a drum of survival. They crawled into a maintenance tunnel, the air hot and filled with the stench of oil. The tunnel was narrow, forcing them to move on hands and knees. The prisoners gasping behind her, the human crawled ahead, his broad shoulders scraping against the metal walls. "Keep moving," he whispered, his voice low but sharp. "They'll sweep these tunnels soon." Suddenly, the tunnel shook, a blast ripping through the ship somewhere above them. Dust and sparks rained down. The prisoners cried out in fear. The girl covered her head, her voice breaking. "We won't make it." The human turned back, his eyes fierce even in the dark. "You will. I'll drag you through the shadows myself, if I have to." They pushed on, crawling deeper until the tunnel opened into another chamber. This one was darker, filled with pipes and steam, the walls dripping with strange green fluid. The air was suffocating, but it gave them cover. The human motioned for silence, crouching low as heavy footsteps passed above. The girl pressed her ear to the wall. Through the metal she could hear the aliens, their voices sharp and furious. They spoke of intruders, of death, of orders to burn everything. Her stomach twisted. She knew the aliens would not just hunt them. They would destroy every prisoner to erase the shame of their failure. The reckless man clenched his jaw, his grip tightening on the weapon. "They want to burn us out. Fine, then we move faster." His voice was low, but the fire in it spread through the group. Even to the weakest prisoner, the girl helped one man to his feet, his legs trembling like broken branches. "Lean on me, don't stop," she whispered, her voice steady even though her heart shook. They moved through the shadows, slipping between steam vents and broken pipes. Every hiss of machinery hid their steps. Every flicker of light masked their movements. But the aliens were closing in, their voices growing louder, their shadows moving like predators through the ship. The girl's breath came fast, her eyes darting to every corner. One mistake, one sound too loud, and they would all be caught. At the end of the corridor, a locked hatch blocked their path. The human stepped forward, slamming his weapon into the control panel. Sparks exploding in the dark. The hatch hissed open slowly. Groaning like a wounded beast, on the other side was another narrow passage, darker and colder. The girl hesitated, fear creeping into her chest. "Where does it lead?" The man glanced back, his grin sharp even through his blood and scars. "Doesn't matter, it leads away from here." The prisoners exchanged nervous looks, but none dared question him. One by one, they slipped through the hatch, swallowed by the shadows. The girl followed last, her eyes catching the reckless man's face for a moment. He looked tired, his body broken, but his spirit burned like steel in fire. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "Why are you doing this?" His reply was simple, fierce. "Because someone has to." The hatch sealed behind them, the sound of marching fading into the distance. Now there was only darkness, the faint drip of water, the hiss of unseen pipes. The girl gripped the prisoner's arm tighter, guiding him through the shadows. Every step was fear, every breath was hope. And somewhere in the dark, she realized something. This reckless man was not just fighting for himself, not just for her. He was dragging all of them through the fire, through the shadows, through the jaws of death itself. He was proving something the aliens would never understand, that even in the coldest dark, humanity would not crawl. Humanity would rise. The shadows could only hide them for so long. The girl knew it, the prisoners knew it, and the reckless human knew it better than anyone. The ship was alive with alarms, its walls shaking as alien voices roared through the corridors, every passage. They took closed in tighter, every vent hummed with power, every step echoed with the sound of hunters closing in. They emerged into a massive chamber, a hangar filled with machines and glowing lights. Strange ships hung above them, suspended by beams of energy, their shapes sharp like blades. The prisoners stopped, their weak legs trembling, their eyes wide with fear. They could go no farther, not without a fight. The reckless man stood at the center of the chamber, his weapon dripping blood, his body broken but unyielding. He glanced at the girl, his grin faint but sharp. "This is it, last stop before freedom." Her voice cracked. "We can't fight all of them. He gave a low laugh, the kind that carried both madness and truth. Then we don't fight all of them, we just fight long enough. The doors at the far side of the hangar burst open. Alien soldiers poured in, their armor glowing, their weapons humming with deadly light. The prisoners pressed back against the walls, some crying, some whispering prayers. The girl felt her heart seize, her body frozen between despair and defiance. The human raised his weapon, stepping forward alone. The glow from the hangar lights caught his face, casting him in fire and steel. "This is where we stand," he said, his voice like thunder. "Not as toys, not as slaves, not as broken animals, but as humans," the aliens charged, their cries echoing across the chamber. The human met them head-on, his blade striking with wild fury. Sparks lit the air as steel met energy, the clash loud, enough to shake the walls. The girl could barely breathe, watching him fight like a storm, every movement reckless but unstoppable. One alien struck him across the side. Blood spilling from his ribs, he staggered, but instead of falling, he swung harder, driving his weapon through the alien's chest. Another tried to flank him, but the girl screamed a warning, her voice sharp. "Behind you," the human spun, cutting the soldier down before the strike could land. The prisoners stirred, their eyes wide with fire. One grabbed a broken pipe from the ground. Another swung a shattered chain. Weak and trembling, they joined the fight, their voices raw with rage. They were no longer silent. They were no longer waiting for death. They were rising. The girl found herself clutching a fallen alien rod. It hummed in her hands, heavy and dangerous. Fear clawed at her chest, but she stepped forward anyway, striking at a soldier who drew close. The blow landed, the alien screamed, and she felt something new surge through her. She was no longer only a victim, she was a fighter. The hangar became chaos. Humans and aliens clashed, weapons sparking, blood spilling across the floor. The reckless man was everywhere at once, his voice shouting, his blade tearing through the enemy. But even he could not hold forever. The aliens were endless, pouring in wave after wave, their fury as endless as the alarms. The girl's arms shook, her strikes growing weak. She stumbled back, her chest burning with exhaustion. Then she saw him fall to one knee, blood streaming down his side, her breath caught, terror slamming into her chest. But even on his knees, his grin never faded. "Get them out," he rasped, his eyes fierce. "I'll hold the line." "No," she whispered, shaking her head. "Not alone." He met her gaze, his eyes blazing. "I was never alone, not once you stood with me." The words hit her like fire. Her fear melted into fury, her weakness into strength. She raised the weapon again, shouting as she struck. The prisoners roared with her, their voices shaking the chamber, their broken bodies fueled by defiance. The aliens faltered, not because they were weak, but because the humans refused to break. Every strike, every scream, every drop of blood was a reminder. This was not submission. This was war. At the center of it all, the reckless human rose again. His body broken, his weapon cracked, but his spirit blazing like fire in the storm. With one last cry, he charged, cutting through the alien ranks, dragging the fight away from the girl and the prisoners. Every step he took was a promise, every strike a roar of defiance. The girl screamed after him, but her voice was drowned by the chaos. Tears streamed down her face, but she did not stop fighting. She knew what this was, his last stand, and in that stand, he carried not just her life, but the life of every prisoner, the honor of every human. The hangar shook with the clash of steel and fire. The air burned with smoke, the floor slick with blood. But above it all, one truth roared louder than any alarm. Humans did not bow, humans did not break. And in the last stand of one reckless man, the universe would remember it. The hangar was burning, smoke curled toward the ceiling. Sparks rained down from shattered machines, and the walls groaned as the ship's systems failed. The girl staggered forward, her chest heaving, her hands trembling as she gripped the alien. Weapon tighter, behind her, the prisoners huddled together, their eyes wide with fear and hope, their bodies bruised but alive. At the center of the chaos stood the reckless human. His body bled from a dozen wounds, his steps unsteady, but his eyes blazed like fire. Every alien that came near him fell. Every strike of his weapon was filled with fury. He was not fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting to buy freedom. The girl's throat tightened, her voice breaking as she shouted, "You can't hold them forever." The man laughed, a low and broken sound. "I don't need forever. I only need long enough." He pushed forward, his blade cutting through another soldier. Sparks flying as the alien collapsed, but with every strike, his strength faded. His movements slowed. The hangar doors groaned open again. More aliens poured in, their eyes glowing, their weapons humming with deadly power. The prisoners gasped. Some stepping back in fear, some clutching whatever scraps of weapons they had. The girl's heart sank. The wave was too large, the fight unwinnable. The reckless man turned toward her, his face pale, his breath heavy, but his grin was still there, fierce and wild. "Get them to the ships," he barked. "Don't stop, don't look back." She shook her head, tears burning her eyes. "Not without you." His gaze locked on hers, sharp and unyielding. "Especially without me." The words cut deeper than any wound. She wanted to scream, to beg, to drag him with her. But when she looked at him, she saw something unshakable. He had already made his choice, and nothing she said could break it. The prisoners began to move, stumbling toward the smaller craft in the hangar. The girl guided them, her weapon raised, her heart breaking with every step away from him. Behind them, the roar of battle grew. Louder, the humans' cries echoing through the smoke. Every sound was both pain and defiance. Fire refusing to be put out. The girl turned once, her eyes burning through the haze. She saw him standing tall, surrounded by a sea of aliens. His body swayed, but his blade still struck. His grin still carved into his scarred face. For a moment, he looked less like a man and more like a force of nature. The prisoners reached the small craft. The girl slammed her hand against the controls, the door hissing open. "Get inside." "Now," she shouted, her voice cracking. One by one they climbed in, their faces pale but their eyes bright with desperate hope. The floor trembled, explosions rippling through the ship. The girl looked back again, her heart twisting in her chest. The reckless man was still fighting, but the aliens closed in tighter, their weapons flashing. She screamed his name, though she had never learned it. Her voice lost in the storm. Then it happened. A massive explosion ripped through the hangar, flames roaring as the ship's systems overloaded. The blast threw aliens into the walls, tearing machines apart. And at the center of it, the human stood. His weapon plunged into the heart of the reactor. His body glowed in the fire, his silhouette blazing like a star. For one final moment, his grin burned through the smoke, fierce and unbroken. Then the light swallowed him. The hangar erupted, fire devouring everything. The girl slammed the ship's controls, the engines roaring to life. The craft tore free from the hangar just as the explosion ripped the alien vessel apart. The prisoners screamed, the ship shuddered, but they were alive outside. The stars opened wide. The wreckage of the alien ship burning in the void. Silence fell inside the craft. The prisoners wept, some clutching each other, some staring blankly at the stars. The girl sat at the front, her hands trembling against the controls, her heart breaking under the weight of loss. She had wanted him to live, to walk free beside her, but he had given something greater. He had given them freedom. He had given them defiance. He had given them proof that humanity did not break. Even in chains, that truth burned brighter than any star outside. Her voice trembled, soft but certain. "They thought we would kneel, but we did not. They thought we would die in silence, but we did not." The prisoners raised their heads, listening. Her eyes blazed as she whispered, "One human showed them what we are." The craft drifted into the vast darkness of space. Behind them, the alien vessel burned, a graveyard of fire and steel. Ahead of them stretched endless stars, endless danger, endless hope. The girl wiped her tears, her heart heavy but alive. She whispered into the silence, "You were reckless, but you were ours." And somewhere in the endless dark, the universe itself seemed to carry the echo. The last stand had been made, the price had been paid, and humanity would never be forgotten.